But I realized if I had this system, I built a system around human behavior, the concept of wealth mentoring. Of course, there's business coaching, that performance enhancement. They're all the things that I sort of knew of a little bit about at that time. That could be done globally out of the one methodology.
And welcome back, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today to this episode of Journey to Legacy. My guest that I have in the studio, Mr. Hugh Massie, the founder and executive chairman of DNA Behavior. Hugh started out as a corporate CPA. He then launched his own financial planning and management investment company, only to realize that he really needed to uniquely and individually hyper focus on his clients. And what he realized was there was a gap in the market that he wasn't able to get as focused and understand his customers, his clients as much as he wanted. It took him down a really interesting path of behavioral science, actually studying the psychology, the analytics behind how people work and think and act so that he could better assist them in their finances. But now he's left that piece of the puzzle behind and is focusing just in on helping people to understand themselves better, to understand their employees better, to understand their customers better, all through behavioral data analysis. This is a really, really interesting episode, all about human psychology with the data piece intertwined. Hugh keeps it really basic so everybody can understand, follow along. I think you're going to enjoy it a lot. So we'll hop right on into the episode with Mr. Hugh Massie of DNA Behavior.
Great to be with you, Wayne.
So, Hugh, you are the executive chairman, the founder of DNA Behavior. You guys are doing some super interesting things. Kick us off. Tell everybody just a little bit about what you're working on.
So, Wayne, I started life as a chartered accountant,
Oh, yeah.
or in America, what we call a CPA.
Yep.
And I spent 10 years doing that. And in Sydney, Thailand, Singapore. And, after I got to the end of that 10 years, and I think I was restless where I
Mm.
was. While there was a pathway ahead for me, I didn't see myself in the corporate world where I was for any longer. So I took my chances and went out on the street and set up a wealth management family office type business.
Oh, well. You set it up yourself. You decided to leave corporate there
Yeah,
and go into wealth management.
yeah. So I went with a clean sheet of paper, and after a few months, that's what I decided to set up. And I always had the idea of providing a hyper personalized experience to investment type clients, to families, to executives, individuals. And in a way, that's what I was doing, I suppose, more innately or instinctively in the in the corporate accounting world that I was in Arthur Andersen, but probably didn't completely realize that's what I was doing. And then I started to get more intentional about it in the wealth management business of, how do we treat people uniquely? And now I didn't have a process or a system other than I was aware humans were different. Some people wanted to see information, at a very high level with diagrams. Others wanted, extensive research and about, etc. So, or then you come to managing risk was different.
Sure.
And you take that into then investment management, financial planning, the concepts are the same. And then one day, and I think this sort of connects to the legacy bit as well, a friend of mine asked me, Hugh, what are you really passionate about? And I said, look, I want to help people all over the world become financially self-empowered.
Mm.
And I had never said that to anybody before, in any way. That was completely out of my subconscious. And I think I was aware enough, Wayne, that if that came out of my subconscious, then I needed to do something about it and discover what did that mean. And, as I reflected on that for a few months, probably 3 to 6 months, and did some research and thinking about myself, I knew that if I was going to help people become financially self-empowered, that was not teaching them what a stock or a bond was, or the principles of, save money today and it'll be worth more tomorrow, that kind of
Mm,
financial
mm,
literacy. Although that is important, it was about teaching people about themselves, and that real wealth comes from understanding your talents. Uh, so that that became, managing your relationships, looking at your whole of life situation, and I tied all that back
yeah,
to human behavior. And I then started to connect the dots that in looking at clients that not only did money put them under pressure, which caused them when they had key decisions to make, when they were under pressure, to behave differently
sure.
in more of a stress behavior. Money also caused stress itself, um, but also in understanding, if wanting to put a tailor-made suit on each client or hyper-personalize the experience, it had to be by understanding who they were and treating them as unique individuals. And then how do you align a husband and wife and a family? And so when I pulled all that together, I realized I needed to know people's natural hardwired behavior. And then I had a chance meeting with a psychologist from England, and she said, so she was living in Sydney, in Australia, where I was at the time, and she said, "Look, this is people's natural instinctive behavior. It's it's formed in them from very early in life, between conception and the first 3 years or so of life. 85% of you is hardwired at that time, and that's what people revert to when they're under pressure." So I realized that that's um, what I wanted to know if I was, and I needed to know if I was going to serve clients as unique beings and manage them through ups and downs and through their life, deal with family differences and people under pressure and all of that. That's what I needed to deal with, people at the core. So I said to her, "Carol, can you help me build a system to uncover this?" And she said, "Yes, I can, but you also need to meet these people in Atlanta, where I am today." So I came over and I got guided through essentially a process to build a science-based system, working with universities and whatnot, clients, and and then we packaged it up and put the technology around it, and that's really the birth of DNA behavior. Of course, that's been the last 20 plus years of work, um,
Yeah.
doing all of that. But today, I don't run a wealth management business. DNA behavior is the business where we support other businesses with behavior and money insights. And really, what we've become is, out of me wanting to help people become financially self-empowered, we've built a business in the field of behavioral economics where we're blending, working at the intersection of behavior and money. And how does that
Wow.
impact decision making? And while a lot of our work has been around, uh, started off with a lot with investors and families, working with financial advisors, and that still goes on today. We do a lot of work with leaders as well in helping them understand their financial behavior, because that impacts their decision making, which then flows through the company. So,
Wow.
so that's the story.
You
That's the story. If that's probably a lot to unpack, but
No,
uh,
that's great. I actually love it. I really enjoy when I get a little bit of like a timeline almost, and then we can
yeah.
sort of run through it little pieces at a time. But how interesting. So today you're running DNA behavior as well as a wealth management
No,
business.
I don't do the wealth management business anymore. That got sold. So once I formed
Oh,
DNA
great.
behavior and built a system and realized that I was far more passionate about human behavior in terms of helping people become self-empowered, to
Mm,
optimize their talents and financial behaviors.
nice.
That once I was on that path, I sold the wealth management business. That went away, and in that journey, I moved from Australia to America because I came over here 40 times in 4 years or so between 2002
Wow.
and 2006 to do all of this. And, I stayed essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, man. It's the story of, you starting out as a corporate CPA and realizing that, to be able to really customize the experience per individual, right? What did you call it? Hyper personalized,
Yep.
treating everybody uniquely. You realize you needed to learn about human behavior, human
Yep.
psychology, and through this entire journey, something you probably just would you say you're a pretty curious person, Hugh?
Yes, that's a good observation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
You just were
I think I
learning
was
more and
always
more.
curious about how people ticked and
Mm,
and what drives people and what makes them successful or what leads to, I suppose on the
yeah.
other side of that, what leads to mistakes. There are consistent patterns in there for all of us.
Absolutely, yeah. And so learning about why people make the decisions that they do, what makes them make those. And so you found actually a big piece of this puzzle was that money causes stress and money changes our behaviors. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that it's easy to be, when you're in a relaxed situation or a socialized setting,
Mm,
you can behave one way with respect to money or just as a person. You can come across, friendly, charming, all of those types of things. But then you put that same person under pressure, which money innately does,
for sure.
and you start to see other dimensions of the person potentially come out. Now, you might see some of the socialized behaviors exacerbated, but I think what we all have is a set of learned behaviors in a way that we've learned to operate in.
Mm,
But under
mm,
pressure, how do we show up differently? For some people, they are inherently natural spenders of money. They're emotional type buyers, and when they're under pressure, that's what they're going to go and do. In a more general setting, they might know that that's what they might do, but they've learned to button it up with budgets and things like that because that's what you've got to do. But
sure.
under pressure, they break free of that, if that makes sense. Or me as a leader might be very naturally results orientated, fast paced, logical in decision making, and that's my hardwired go-to place.
Mm,
But on
mm,
a general day-to-day basis, I could be quite relational with my team, but put in a moment of pressure, I might forget to be relational. And
sure.
that's when the switch gets flicked, and that's when the problems come, right? Because you're working, you're not seeing the blind spot of what you're doing.
Yeah, of course, right? Because when you're under pressure, when you're in that situation, like you said, that's when you're not realizing the blind spot.
And
Like
it could be
it,
for a nanosecond, but the damage is done, right? And the decisions are made, or your personal impact has already been felt, and it's too late. And I think that's the self-awareness for everyone. But if
mm,
I suppose what I've tried to do is help financial advisors, for example, understand that that's what they might do themselves,
mm,
even though they're advising clients, they're under pressure. So they're going to come across a certain way, and your clients are going to do A, B, C, D types of things when they're under pressure. And you
yeah,
may as well know that so you can address that
mm,
in the context of the wealth management decisions. It's the same with a leader. If I'm coaching or we're working with a leader, is for him or her to understand these are your propensities. This is how your financial behavior shows up, and how's that impacting your company?
yeah. So it's even it sounds to me even that like you said that even if it happens for you said a nanosecond, right? Like you don't realize that when you're under pressure, a change happens, right? In how you are interacting with others, how you are rationalizing decisions, whatever it might be. And so
Yeah.
it seems like this is kind of like not preventative maintenance, dare I say. Like we need to be understanding ourselves on this level before something like this happens that's maybe, you can't be fixed.
That's right. I think the more that you can understand this about yourself up front and be aware of, okay, when I'm in a difficult situation, this is
Mm,
likely to be how I'm going to respond, and then be able to check yourself or check yourself before you wreck yourself,
nice.
and you give yourself a better chance to stop what you're doing. Like, you can be angry and write an email, but wisdom would say at least park it in the draft box overnight and go and read it tomorrow. Would you send the same thing to a person? And what's a one-page diatribe blowing something up or somebody up might come down to a one sentence email, or you
Sure.
just file it away. I think
Yeah.
but if you take that sort of raw example, that's what's going on everywhere, right?
Yeah.
You could be having a conversation with someone, and if you're one of those people that talks a lot and very direct in your communication, you better understand you're probably going to shoot your mouth off too much somewhere, and you can't retract those words, right?
Mm,
It's like it's
mm.
hard to retract an email that you should never have sent, right? And
Yeah.
now we all make these mistakes in different ways, right?
Mm, mm.
Depending on who we are. It just shows up differently. I've just used a couple of the examples. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. But no, depending on who we are, like you say, right? Like this pressure comes out of us differently, right? And like we
yeah,
respond differently. And so we have to understand how we each individually will respond to it, will react.
right. And depending on how we're wired, we've all got different perspectives on life, and what do we see as important? I was listening to this morning. I'm part of a technology discussion group, if you want to call it that, and we have varying people come in and make presentations about their business and their business opportunity and that type of thing. And sitting there listening to one this morning, some people are looking for the high level message that's more emotive. Why would you build a business in this area? Whereas some of the others are getting, want to know the granular, what's the financial risk straight out the gate? Well, that's just human behavior at work in a lot of ways, right? Because what are we all listening for, right? Um,
Yeah. I think a lot of times people make the assumptions that others think and act the same way as we do. It sounds like that is a lot of what your research has uncovered that that's not the case by any means.
no, no, I think that we all, that's right. I think, and that's one of the problems in with actually the field of behavioral finance. And I was talking to a well-known professor in the field this week, and after I've been sort of following him for 20 years, and it was interesting. He reached out to me a couple of weeks ago and said, "Hugh, would you read my book and see how we can collaborate together going forward?" Because he knew I had a system. And what we discussed was exactly that. Okay, everybody wants well-being in life, right? Let's put that down
Sure.
in some level. But what that well-being is and means and how it shows up in varying situations will be different for each of us.
Yeah.
What are the risks we're each prepared to take in life are different in particular settings. Some people will take financial risk, but not physical risk. Um, Relationship risk. Some people will take risks on people, others not. And so that's where understanding the different, the how each person measures up. This is really what I do, is putting measurement on the behavior for each person and saying, okay, your perspectives will be stronger in these areas versus these other areas. But if you're blind to it, this is the consequence of what that is, of what will happen.
Yes. Yes. Putting a measurement behind it for each person. And so you mentioned now a couple times that you guys put together a system and
Yeah.
built tech also, that's what turned into DNA behavior. Can you share this a little bit more specifics around like what you all are doing? How do you actually work
So I
with
think
clients?
that what a lot of people out there, not everybody, but Wayne, a lot of people out there have probably at some point in their life completed a personality assessment or a behavioral assessment of some
Sure.
sort, whether it's a short one or a long one.
Mm.
And what we built is we built our own proprietary assessment. We've got a more unique assessment model in the way in which the questions are asked, which makes it fairly in depth, but it's pretty slick to do. It takes 10.5 minutes on average. And you're choosing between three words, most and least like, and leave one word out. So, you know, there might be three words like aspiring, patient, and detailed. Which one of those three words are you most like? Now, for me, it's aspiring, and patient is the least, and then detailed sometimes, sometimes not. But for a different person, that selection is different. And some will say, I'm all three of those. Well, but you're more of one than you are of the others. And you do that enough, and then we're able to build using, scientific techniques, we're able to build, we built a psychometric model out of it that we then know when you've got X combinations out of the questions or responses, this is likely how you will approach spending and saving, taking risks, your level of resilience. Are you an innovator? Are you goal driven? You focus on quality life versus, everyone's got a different perspective about work-life balance, right? So we're able to, from that, address areas like that, and we've got 4,000 insights, believe it or not, that come out of our system. So we know that's that's what we're doing using the tool. It's very pinpointed, and then it's a matter of how it's all presented. So we have an app that has all sorts of tools in there to, one, show you what your strengths and struggles are with this, who you'd be best working with, who you're going to find in your family easier to interact with, all of that stuff we've got sitting, how you're responding to the stock market right now. It's interesting. In our diagram, there's a lot of red,
Huh.
but there's a few people, because the market's very, turbulent and dangerous with American tariffs and whatnot. But you've got a portion of the world that's saying green. Well, gee, this might be a buying opportunity, right?
Of
Um,
course.
so that's what we're doing, and we're trying to take the psychometrics and then apply it
Yeah. Yeah.
to, to varying settings to make it more usable. We have
Definitely.
an app where we measure the and rate the behaviors of leaders, and we
Mm.
can pinpoint if a leadership team has this combination of behaviors, they will be far more profitable
Nice.
than a, a leadership team with these types of behaviors, right?
Nice. So it sounds like even testing that honestly employers should be giving to prospects, like potential hires, before putting them into certain teams.
Oh, absolutely. That is what I would call a vanilla application.
Uh,
That is one. I mean, the next step of that is, let's say you're a financial advisory firm,
mm,
you would work out, okay, is this person a fit for X advisory role or
sure.
role in the team? But then who should work with what pool of clients?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we help firms with that, right? So that then becomes the whole, how do you map out the organization, right? Starting
Yeah.
right at the top with the leader, who should be in their executive team, and then who are the, if you want to call it salespeople, advisors,
Sure.
relational people, who works with which combinations are going to optimize the client service. Because at the end of the day, that's where rubber really hits the road for a business, is you can talk about employee engagement to the cows come home, but at the end of the day, while that's important, it's got to show up in how the clients get served.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. How the clients get served
Will
when it
reflect the
actually.
employee engagement in many respects, but it's all got to be
Yeah.
aligned. And and
Yeah.
and so that's a lot of the work we do. Um, and traditionally
Fascinating.
it's been done from people completing the profile in our system.
Mm,
But now with the advent of AI,
mm,
we built an AI module, so we call it a digital scan, a DNA digital scan, where we can actually take somebody's, name, where they work, what role they're in. That's pretty simple information, and able to go out and access public data sources, no private data sources, and get enough information for the system to score the profile for them without them having to do it. So
Wow.
you now, is it as accurate as them doing it
I was
themselves?
about to
No,
ask.
but it's
Yeah.
pretty accurate.
Mm.
It's still a very high level of accuracy. And so let's say I want to market to, I'm a financial advisory firm and I've got 50,000 prospects. I could now at least start to customize that experience out the gate. And
Yeah.
or I want to hire I'm looking at who should I fill for a role in my team, and I've got a whole lot of applicants. Are we going to wait to profile the final applicant, or why don't we screen everybody that applied up front and get a bit of a look at who we will interview, right?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, the applications are pretty endless, honestly.
But well, I think what we're doing is we're breaking through the barrier or the friction barrier of people having to
Mm.
complete the assessment. Now, I would always say that the better the information you have, the better the result. But in today's world, if we can scale up and get to know something about everybody earlier, then better decisions can be made, right?
Better decisions can be made, right? The more information you have earlier, better decisions can be made from that point. And then once you have the availability or the access to the more detailed information, right, or data points, I suppose, then
Yeah,
you can dive deeper and deeper and deeper. Hugh, talk to me about this for a second. Right? I want to rewind back just a little bit. Right. So your corporate CPA, you said you sort of just had enough of it. So you went into wealth management, set up your own firm. But
yeah.
when this pivot happened, when you were traveling to the US, to Atlanta, you said there was like a certain psychologist there, something like that.
I met her in Sydney, but
Okay.
she referred me to people in America.
Referred you to people in America. What was that time of life like? Like I can only imagine, you have this curiosity of, okay, I think I need to learn more about people uniquely so I can serve them better. But it's one thing to say, okay, let me go read some psychology books, a whole nother to fly across the world and then eventually start to pivot to, what, this is going to be a brand new business of mine, right? What was going through your mind?
So I think the first thing is it's a good question. The first thing, and given we're talking about legacy, was
Yeah.
I realized that in a way my life purpose which was connected to my passion, jumped out of my mouth, and therefore I needed to do something with it. And then I figured out, Wayne, that there was a business model around this that I could have a system that did this. Yes, I then got a choice. I had a choice of, okay, do I just deploy the system inside my financial advisory business and stay in Sydney? But there was a piece of what was going on at the time as well is I realized that what was bubbling up for me is, which made me realize I had these dreams as a kid of having a global business. And I wanted to have my own, brand that could be globalized. And I knew that that would not be in a wealth management business. I couldn't see any way in which I could do that. I'm not UBS Bank or Citibank or anything like that,
Mm,
right? So
mm.
that it wasn't going to work that way. Maybe there are pathways to do it, but I realized if I had this system, I built a system around human behavior, the concept of wealth mentoring. Of course, there's business coaching, that performance enhancement. They're all the things that I sort of knew of a little bit about at that time. That could be done globally out of the one methodology. It's just then a matter of finding users, subscribers, if you want to call it that. And so that's how all of that came into being. So it was finding the purpose, and knowing if I was committed to that, then finding the right business model and being prepared to stay the course and take whatever comes. And I had an ultimate faith that somehow it would work out.
Mm.
And of course, there's been, plenty of bumps in the road on the journey. You get some wins and you get some losses. And hopefully 25 years later, which is what it is, essentially, it's coming on that. I'm still standing, but actually, I'm probably in a place now where we're really starting to capitalize on this because technology allows me to do what I'd always dreamt that I could do, you know?
Oh,
Uh,
what?
yeah, because it enables you to go mass scale, to globalize, and to hyper personalize. What we can do is hyper personalize experiences for people in lots of arenas using technology and human behavior really is because we're all different. If you know how people are different, then you can put a tailor-made suit on them. And while a lot of the work we've done is addressing that in financial planning, there's no real difference to doing that in accounting, um, legal services, buying widgets, uh, whatever setting, it can be done. Would be another big area where people need to be, in a way related to based on who they are. That's the issue. Yeah, too many businesses are serving people on a one size fits all basis.
Yeah.
And
If
that's when
only
you
they
get
knew more.
disgruntled customers, right? Or clients or patients.
Yeah. So, I really love communication, right? And I find that in today's day and age with technology now, especially with AI, people are losing how to communicate. They were never taught in the first place how to communicate well.
Yeah.
There's the original problem. And so, talk to me a little bit about how this impacts communication and maybe some I don't know applications for, let's say, marketing teams and sales teams and specifically leaders, right? I really love that space. And so it's interesting for me to hear more how this could be directly applied into communication.
Yeah, I think that, communication's interesting, and you're right, Wayne, that in a way, communication's everything. And
Mm.
I'll try and keep it simple. I think that some people want to be communicated with the bottom line. What's how much money am I going to make, right? Out of
For
doing
sure.
this.
Yeah.
Just very logical. What's the risk reward, right? That's for some people. Others want to hear it more of how does this make me feel? Is this purpose driven? Is there a reason why a deeper reason why I should be doing this? And they want security
Mm.
addressed that, to feel safe with it. And I think it goes back to this presentation I was listening to this morning where all this feedback was being given. Some people wanted the high level story, and others are pushing in for, oh, I want to know how all of the risk is being managed out the gate and wanting all the details before we've even got the story out of one's mouth. That's communication styles.
Yeah.
But if I apply it to, another setting is a lot of salespeople are fairly dominant. If they're
Right.
outside hard edge salespeople, they've got an agenda. I want to sell you X.
Sure. Sure.
And what they miss is the fact that depending on the client, if they
Mm.
come to me, I'm one of those people too. But what I'm really wanting is to be given the options.
Mm.
Give me three options with the risk reward, and I'll either pick one. Don't try and second guess which one I'll pick, because it might be the most expensive one that's got the most value because I can see the point of it. There'll be other ones, days where it's the cheapest, or it'll be a hybrid of one of those models. I'll just come back and say, look, why can't we do X? But if you allow me to make the choice, then you're likely to get a win. And it's the same with like my team presenting to me something, or here we need to make a strategic decision. I'll decide in 5 minutes if you present it that way. If you don't present it that way, It'll be days and probably never because the trust is lost. But what that's also saying is that, you know, I, as a salesperson dealing with somebody who was like me, needs to realize that I have to adapt my behavior to some degree, right?
Right. Yeah, you have to adapt your behavior to some degree, right? And
Yeah,
that's the, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, give me your thought.
yeah, that's the key point. Now, if I'm dealing with somebody that's opposite to that, that can't really handle too many options, then I need to spend more time and can't assimilate a lot of information. I need to spend more time with them understanding what they feel and then come up and say, look, more gently, I think this is the roadmap and I'm going to take you along that path. And that's and talk more in feelings rather than in, more rational and numbers, right?
Yeah.
Now, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, it all ends up in the same place, right? It's still got to be right. You still got to address numbers and whatnot. But are you addressing it in sort of a logical fashion or in a more relational fashion?
Relational or an emotional fashion. Yeah. I mean, this
For others,
sounds
they'll see
amazing
if
to
they
me.
see it in a graph and they know who else is buying, they're in, right?
Sure. Sure.
And
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 if
then
we
for
can
others,
know how to read people ahead of time, how to communicate to them, it makes life so much easier.
and I think the Wayne, the example I often use for people is when I first realized this, but it was very innate, and I was not, I suppose, as armed up with knowledge as I am today. But when I was a tax advisor, young tax advisor, I figured out that, you know, clients, the person often bringing the problem to me saying, look, we need to make X decision about our tax,
Mm,
might only want to read a page, right? And have a diagram and what's the bottom line. But his or her team behind him, who are then going to verify or validate the decision or he's going to ask for their approval, want to see all the research and how did you get there?
mm,
That's where the 50-page letter comes out. Now, of course, in between all of that, you've had to do a lot of research to get
of
the
course.
advice down to one page. No one will pay $50,000 for one page,
Mm,
but in a way, they'll pay $50,000 for 50 pages. But if the person reading the one page doesn't, the person making the final decision doesn't understand it, you're not going to get
yeah.
anything, right?
No, no,
So
that's all
you've got
thrown out the
what
window.
that's really saying is you've got to appeal to all styles in there. And sometimes even the person you're interfacing with isn't the decision maker. That person's behind the scenes. And so therefore,
Sure.
how do you present things in a way and communicate in a way that everybody's going to understand, right? Or you're selling to a
Yeah.
husband and wife,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
One of them you think is looking online, but there's somebody else also looking there too, right? So
Of course.
this is where communication needs to be
Become hyper
personalized. You've got to direct
personalized.
it to the person
Mm,
very
mm.
carefully.
Yeah. And so that's what DNA behavior is doing. And so, Hugh, is
Yeah, that's
it
what we're doing in lots of different settings. Yeah.
tons of different settings, right? So, talk to me about as we start to wrap up. Um, who is your ideal customer? How can people use it? Could like an individual listener, right, try it out? Like, what do the applications
Yeah,
look
an
like?
individual listener, if you send me an email to at DNA Care at dnabehavior.com, we'll give a individual listener, because some of the individual listeners, they could be a consumer, but they could be a leader in their own right in some way or a
Yeah.
decision maker. Of course, we'll do a trial, but our typical client is a business
Mm,
that's got a pool. It's got a team a team and it's got a pool of clients. If there's in the ideal world, if there's more than 100 in total that are going to get profiled, that's better
sure.
because we can then set the experience up to do all the things that we've talked about today. Now,
Mm,
it's pretty simple. We've got businesses using us with only got 10 people in their team
sure.
and a handful of clients. What we have is technologically simple to use,
Mm,
but to maximize the benefit, and it works better with bigger groups,
sure.
but it really can be a business of any size.
Yeah. For me, I'm thinking
We
about
but we are doing more
applications.
enterprise. Sorry, Wayne, we're doing more enterprise work now because, you know, there are businesses out there with, tens and hundreds of thousands of, customers that they could do a whole lot better with in communicating. Um,
Definitely.
or you're a
Definitely
venture
interesting.
capital firm and you've got, a whole lot of businesses that you're sifting through. Why wouldn't you want to know about the people up front?
Exactly. Like that's a really great one. Man, when you have in venture capital, it's just every single business, the applications are endless. If you can
Yep.
understand who you are communicating with, who you are interacting with on a daily basis, right? If you can hyper personalize it more to them, every single person can use this in the entire world,
Yep.
right? We need to learn this.
And I think that what the power of technology is that it can enable it to become a guided experience so that
Yeah.
technologically a person of one style could be given a slightly different experience to a person of another style
Mm, mm,
without all the salespeople having to remember styles and things. I think that's where, when we started, it was much more of while we had technology, it was much more of a manual process. Okay,
of course.
your X, this person's X style. You've got to remember all these things and write a script down.
Yeah.
Whereas now
Yeah.
that can be done with AI. And I think that's the big difference. Or you're writing a letter and you
What a
know the
time to be
person,
alive.
the person's this style, write your
Yep.
letter the way you
They'll
want to
write
write
in
it, and
that
then
way.
ask our system, we'll customize it for you, right?
Wow. Wow. I absolutely love it. Hugh, we're unfortunately all out of time, but I always like
Yep.
to end with first off, please tell me what is the definition of legacy and what is the legacy you're working to leave on this world?
Yeah, I think that legacy is in a lot of ways is to me is living beyond yourself and how can your work and message beliefs carry on when you're not carrying on or when you're
Sure.
not there. And I think it's how it impacts other people and that so that how can you through your message, you as a person, your authenticity leave a positive impact on other people. And Wayne, a lot of the work I do, messaging, is to get businesses to think that way in terms of measuring their success. How many lives can you positively impact in a
Yeah.
year is a great measurement of success as opposed to, okay, the business made $20 million last year. Whoopee, who really cares, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, there are some people who do care, clearly, and there are reasons to care, if you've got financiers and whatnot. But it's like a guy last night said, at this meeting I was at, said, we can think of value and what businesses are doing in terms of shareholder value, or are we thinking about stakeholder value, which makes it a lot broader.
Nice.
The businesses that do better, in a way, their legacy is bigger in the sense that they've got concern for their community. They've
Right.
got concern for the employees, all suppliers,
Mm,
all the stakeholders are involved. And I think that's now
yeah.
the legacy of that business. And which ones are going to survive? I think
Correct.
it's those that are thinking about
The
legacy,
stakeholders, yeah,
stakeholders, social
people they're
impact.
impacting.
That's what it's about.
Absolutely. That's what
And
it's all about.
if you work on that carefully, your brand will grow, you as a person will grow, and I think comes with that your wealth will grow. Um,
Beautiful. Hugh, I couldn't have said it better myself. I completely agree with you. If any listeners out there want to learn about you or more about what DNA behavior is up to, where's the best place for them to go find
So
out?
the best place is go to our website at dnabehavior.com. It's rich in materials, information, anything you want to know about how human behavior is applied in any area, go there. Or LinkedIn, there's plenty of stuff in there.
Great.
I'm the only Hugh Massie, and it's spelled Massie in Atlanta. Um, there's not many of us in the world, and uh, go there. And if you want to send me an email, do so at dnacare@dnabehavior.com, and I'll get in touch with you. And yeah, there's books, whatever you want to get can be found on the website.
Hugh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. We'll link to everything down below. You're making a huge impact and you're leaving a massive legacy by actually helping other people to make a bigger impact and leave a more meaningful legacy as well. Thank you for
Thank you,
that.
Wayne. I appreciate that.
And there it is, everybody. What did you think? Please do us a huge favor and share the episode. Help us to grow Hugh's business. Help us to grow Journey to Legacy. We do that through your help, through you sharing our episodes. How interesting is it to me? The biggest thing that stuck out is that Hugh is now using AI and machine learning to be able to deploy this system at scale, right? It's no longer just an individual having to fill out a questionnaire, right? Even though it only takes 10 minutes and everybody can go do this. But now, through all of the public information and data that's out there, they can actually do this analysis on anybody. So the applications in my mind are really wild that anybody can, everybody, if you can understand who you are communicating with, right, who you are serving, if you can understand them better, you can serve them better. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. If you are looking for help in communicating better with your customers, with your colleagues, with your friends, your family, come check out Journey to Legacy. We are a community dedicated to helping each other leave a more meaningful impact on this world. And it's really through how we communicate, right? How we build relationships. End of day, that's the most important thing. That's the legacy we want to leave, is leaving everybody we come in contact with a little bit better than when we found them. Come check us out over at journeytolegacy.org. Until next time, thank you all for being here. My name is Wayne Veldsman, and I will see you soon.